I hope I'm able to give you all a total view on the screen. Yeah, 20 minutes. I just made the math, and that means that for every second I talk, it is multiplied by 1.6 million seconds, because I'm now 61 years old. So imagine 20 minutes in a lifetime. So 1 to 1.6 million. It's quite funny. So the very first picture I have of family is this one. Born in 1839, and I'm always quite impressed by that. I think he was a fisherman. Rumor says that he slept in summer about 3 hours a day, and he slept in winter 15 hours a day, being a Norwegian fisherman, with my father and grandfather, my grandfather was an architect, and my uncle as well. So it's a bit of 1925 till now. It's 100 years of, I just found out by making this lecture. The only photo I have, I haven't known my grandfather very well. The only photo I have is of his apartment in Hamburg, because there was not so much work in Holland. So that's where he ended up in the 1920s, 30s, where my father was born also. Just notice the Mies van der Rohe chair. I will get back to that later. And this is me in Norway, which was for us paradise with my grandmother. She's from Norway, and my sister. We had the most amazing summers over there, because that's how it ended up a bit. From Mandal, my grandmother, she had asthma, or she had trouble. Quite cold up there, humid, of course not so luxurious as nowadays. So she moved down to Hamburg to work for a family, and met my grandfather there. And then they moved to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, back in Amsterdam, Zwolle. So that's where. Then he worked in part for Bruno Taut. And again, rumor says he had his internship at Le Corbusier, but I can't verify that one. Always a nice thing to talk about. But coming back to, I have very, very strong memories of Norway. Probably I idealize it quite a bit, but to me this is Norway, and to me this is sort of a paradise-like environment where we like to stay quite a bit. Being in boats, the simplicity of life up there. Well, they went back because of the war, etc., back to Holland, and this is, for example, the house of my grandfather, who had a beautiful house with a garden with lots of art pieces. I've never been there, but it's still there. I found out via Google Maps that it still exists. I should maybe visit it once in the east of Holland. But funny enough, my uncle designed a house for my parents. This is my father, 1958. He came back from Scandinavia, where he had an internship in Finland. We always had this idea of being from Scandinavia in part. It was a very Scandinavian setting. But in fact, it was not. It's still there. It did not change at all. My mother lived there for 58 years. She passed away. And again, I must say, this is Sallandse Heuvelrug, one of the hilly, let's say, it's not flat as the rest of Holland. Beautiful. We lived in the forest. So they built a house in a forest. It was the second plot to be built, and most villages said, "You're crazy, you're not going to live in a forest." But nowadays it's of course the opposite. Everybody wants to live in the forest. I found out a couple of years ago, then when I almost bought a Rietveld house just above Amsterdam North. In the end I didn't, because it was for me too much back to my parents' house, because I found out that the house we lived in was almost like a Rietveld. Every detail, the doorknobs, everything was exactly like in this house of Rietveld. But we loved it. Everybody loved the house. It was, the people in the village always said, apart. That says enough, because they don't understand the idea of a modernist villa. But it was light, it was bright. The deer were literally running through the garden. And we had this chair that also Grandpa had. And I must correct one person who also was here, Eduardo Soto de Mara, who said, yeah, Mies is lying because he designs these chairs, but actually he wants to sit on that one. It's quite funny. Yeah, you can look at the chair like that, but I think modernism is extremely interesting because we used that chair. We sat on it, we rocked on it, we sledged on it a lot with my sisters. Sledging it, we were running around, we were driving with it. We used it upside down as a tent. So I think that chair is brilliant. I wanted to correct that one. We made a lot of trips. My parents loved to travel in their old car. And if there's one thing that I remember, is playing with Lego. So there's still this soft spot with my kids. Whenever I'm in the Lego shop, I can't stop buying. I spoil them on Lego. That was life. This is the street. No pedestrian sidewalks. Simplicity kills the cat, you could say. This is the forest. There is also a ravine, a small ravine. It's about 25 meters deep only. And you can use that perfectly. For what? For building huts. That's what we did. Friends of ours, with my friends, mostly 2, 3, or 4. We had them half underground. We even had this lock that with an electric tube you could pull on a string and then the door would open 5 meters further down. We were extremely proud of that. We built it totally underground. Later on, it turned out to be very dangerous, but we did it anyway. We had them high up in the trees. That's what I did a lot. Lego and huts. And I grew a bit older, 8, 9 years old, and then you just went away 6, 7 kilometers. I just calculated later on. We just passed illegally the provincial road. I was not allowed to do it, but we did. And then you were here, playing up here. But I also like to draw, and I was fascinated by Escher completely. I even made my own sort of Eschers, sort of strange drawings. And art, because my mother was extremely interested in art. At 84, I think, was the first exhibition I went to, La Grande Parade in the Stedelijk Museum, where I stood in front of Rosie Fingerdawn at Loose Point. I was struck by lightning. Willem de Koning, especially because I think it's so powerful. And what amazed me most is that his traditional, on the left you see his older drawings, that people sort of are able to free themselves from the constraints of figurative drawing. So it's the freedom that an artist had. I was perplexed, I was jealous. But of course, your life becomes, your world becomes bigger. I also stuck on this. I will show you for 1 minute. I have a few movies. I think it's amazing, based on the Kees Boeke idea of, zooming in, zooming out.
The picnic near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early 1 October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now, every 10 seconds, we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider.
As I said, based on Kees Boeke's book Cosmic View, and then they made this film with an amazing film zooming out into the galaxy, 1 to 28, I think, and then zooming in again, and then into the hand of the man, zooming into 10 to the minus 14, which opened a world to me. And again, I was perplexed to see it. And the world opened, of course, moving to Delft, studying and having amazing field trips. And at that time, you had the zelf opgezette project. So the project you could initiate yourself, choose your tutors, and then go. So we went to France, things like that, studying the Bastides, whatever. The freedom of studying was, to me, amazing. After living in a reformed little village in Holland that I wanted to escape after I turned 14. It was to me too sort of, I didn't like it anymore. This religious sort of thing on you. Studying, I don't show a lot about stuff, but then in the very end, Max Risselada, my professor, whom teach me incredibly a lot, we at a certain moment were able, the house Maison Giroux was sold, and we were allowed as the TU Delft to photograph the whole house before it was sold, with including all the furniture, all the art, from the Monets, the Manets, the Picassos. So we had the house for 2 days, and the guys just left. I was amazed. I was amazed. It opened up a world to me again in Paris. And Le Mépris, I saw the movie, I saw the house. I didn't know about the house. Then I understood that was this Casa Malaparte. That also, Brigitte Bardot, Michel Piccoli, quite a pivotal moment, I think, in film, and also in how you deal with spatial qualities. Very impressive. That reads to me, when it comes down to film, I think this is to me the most important film I've ever seen, that I like the most. Wim Wenders, Paris, Texas, especially because it teaches you also a lot about space and about how you can treat space, how you can use it, especially, of course, the scene where they have their dialogue between Sasha Kinski and Haradine Stanton, talking about their past, and then having one shot, one dialogue, almost a monologue, because he talks, she almost doesn't. And shown in so many ways, I was really impressed by that. And as sometimes these kind of things go beyond film and teach you something about your own profession, in that sense, architecture. And I wanted to know more about space, about how it works. The study in Delft was very traditional in a way, modernist traditional in the Corbusier sense, you could almost say. And then you got this first El Croquis by Miralles. I think I have studied that book for 3 months every day, at least 1 or 2 hours. And I said, I wanted to work there. I want to work there. And Max Risselada, my professor, well, I know him, let's go. So I could not enter at first, so I went to Jago Conde, a very nice architect, and we did lots of experiments with projections on buildings, and we even did it on the Beurs van Berlage here in Amsterdam. But I got into Benedetta and Enrique. I got into the office because I had this grant from what is now called Stimuleringsfonds, so I could work there for free. What a freedom, what an amazing thing. I could work for free. So, oh, well, if you're free, then just come over. Of course. Because he just separated, and there was some problems in the office financially. So, but for free, you can always work, of course. Let's say we don't have these arbo conditions in offices in the 80s, late 80s, beginning 90s in Spain. We were working on these small lamps. It was very romantic. Parapets under construction, experimenting, as you see here. We made the models. And I photographed for the Architect, the magazine, some projects, and it impressed me again. And he taught me an amazing thing about the three-dimensionality, and as also Donna said, the space in between. So that architecture was not about the material and the things you, let's say, make, the color, the material, the building. It is about what is left over, the emptiness in between. And I was struck by how he did it. And his drawings, that's again, as I said, I studied them for many months, many weeks in that magazine, El Croquis, which was like amazing. Every month, El Croquis came at that time. Now it's all on the internet, but in a way, you need a book to really dive into it. They have an extreme beauty as well, but if you're in Spain, and if you know Garcia Lorca, and you read his poems, and there was a big exhibition, things are connected much more than you think. And so we talked with Enrique and I about this, and he amazed me a lot of where he drew inspiration from. So I became more and more interested in art as well, because the expression and the freedom of art to me is a horn of plenty. Especially this Gordon Matta Clark. There's this small movie where one of the buildings being demolished is used by Gordon Matta Clark to make the conical intersect. I wish I had been in that space, but it was there only for a few months. And can you imagine, like Les Halles and these buildings, they were all torn down, and in return, most of the buildings quite terrible. Luckily here, there was next door the building of the Centre Pompidou. I think this sort of contrast between the old town and modernity struck me, and I wanted to know more about Gordon Matta Clark. These were collages that Enrique made quite a lot. And they linked then in the end to also this, to knowing what David Hockney does and how three-dimensionality, as in the work of Mirais, but also in the work of art, in the work of David Hockney, helped me to understand building up space and making a design, giving interesting spaces that people comfort instead of generic spaces. That photography, it's quite easy to understand. You make photos, you glue them together. But then, if you look at the paintings of some of the more complex paintings of David Hockney, they intrigue me tremendously. I can look at it, I can study them for many hours, I must say. Which is very much also about perspective. And I dove into this idea of perspective that, 1400 something. Artists didn't know how to do it. You get this clumsy sort of idea, and then a few decades later, all artists know exactly what is happening. It's almost like now from not computer to computer, or from writing your own text to AI. How do you deal with this new idea of knowledge of what you can do? And then art has helped us always tremendously, in a way. I made some study trips. Barragan, yeah, what to say. Illegally sneaked in through the gardener. We could walk around for 1.5 hours here. Stay away from the windows, otherwise the people see you. It was easy to get access at that time. Yeah, and if you get to Tikal, then again, impressed. But moreover, impressed by the fact that I was, for the first time in my life, out of the Western world. I went to other continents, other countries that didn't sort of connect to, let's say, Holland in a way. And I liked that a lot. I was extremely happy to be able to do those travels and to free myself from the constraints of, first of all, this reformed religious ideas, but also the limitations of, let's say, Dutch society in a way, where you enter in a very cheap hostel like this. I mean, you could stay here the whole day, being amazed by the beauty. And to be honest, I never have that feeling in a Hilton hotel. Brazil, where you see brutalist buildings that do exactly what you want them to do. For example, with this pool that has this relief inside, as if there's a big whale in the pool. I think it's utterly romantic and utterly beautiful too. You can have your laps, but you can also play. With that freedom, I liked a lot. Or Ethiopia, while working on the embassy, traveling around and taking all my family, all my kids also to this place. But also being confronted by these terrible contrasts between the favelas and the super rich, that immediately didn't feel right and it didn't feel comfortable. And I think this was just like 30 years ago. I think that gap has become way bigger, way unhealthier. So how we deal with that? That is, I think, what our our job should be about. And it brought me also back to paintings of Mark Rothko that I since then have looked at, studied, followed a lot. Or Soloit, that amazed me so much. We used it a lot for example, the roof shape of our arts center in Den Helder, but many other projects. I think what they can do in art, we could also do in buildings, staying away from the generic, let's say, modernist floors that you can make. And then I stumbled up on films that I've seen many times because they exactly tell you this very strange moment in history. 1949. I think it's here. It's only sort of the romantic life just after the war, and then you step into Mon Oncle, which is not only that. You will see in the second half. The house of Mon Oncle himself, and then he goes to his family, where you have the absolute contrast of, is this where we come from, and is this where we go to? But it's very humoristically told in a way. And then in playtime, of course, the old world is gone. By the way, all these buildings by Jacques Tati were scaffolding with fabrics around it. This was the most expensive film at that time, and he went bankrupt on it. Where Paris is the same as London. And I think up to today, we still do not cope with that idea of modernity, that things become the same everywhere. Funny, if he had waited a couple of years later, he could have filmed it for free. But he made scaffoldings of, I think, 6 million francs, and then he was bankrupt. That's why he made films every 9 years, only one. I think now they make 3 sequels in a year or something. Yeah. But connected to that, there was also this amazingly interesting musical film by Herbert Rappaport with music by Shostakovich that tells it in a different way, where the last dacha is being demolished among the city that is sort of crawling up to it. Russia housed 20 million people in about 15 years' time in Plattenbau, in prefab building. Simply because it's a pity that the music isn't there on this one, but okay. As you know, Prouvé and Eames and all kinds of other architects had this very inventive, lightweight building structures and prefabrication methods coming from the Second World War, more or less, for building industry. But then, of course, 2 French engineers in France, they simply won the race with very heavy concrete Plattenbau. And since then, that's what we do. We only build in concrete, up to more or less now. And all those other sort of techniques have gone. They just collapsed, literally under the pressure of all the concrete that we're doing now. And that didn't feel well. It also didn't feel well because, you know, traveling again through Ethiopia or through Mexico, you feel the uncomfortable situation of a world changing, of all the forests gone, etc. So yeah, we shouldn't blame modernity in a way, and definitely don't blame like the beautiful structure of Corbusian houses that are utterly romantic. It's more the sort of the industry that makes it in a certain moment like ugly in its speed and in its scale, where we don't think of differentiation anymore, of context, as Donna also said. This, by the way, we started search, and we also started to collect art that I love to do nowadays. Edwin Zwakman, which is a photo of a flat high-rise, which is not a flat. It's a model. It's a cardboard model. It's all fake what you see here, but I think it's amazing that artists are able to do that. And then I stumbled upon a Solowitz that I immediately bought when I went to America for a holiday. But the problem was the first day I spent the whole budget on this art piece, so I had to sort of change my itinerary a little bit. Of Vincenzo Castella, who depicts very well the changing city from industry to nowadays. Industry moves out, is invisible almost, industry. Very unhealthy because all the production processes of invisible industry or invisible meat production is extremely ugly, but since we don't see it, we don't bother. And again, art makes your heart open. Sculpture-wise, Anish Kapoor in New Zealand, you get to it and then you're just silent for an hour, for 2 hours. You want to be there. Or Richard Serra, it's quite amazing. So I don't know if building is the solution to, let's say, to a better world or whatever, but definitely nature is, and more and more together with Katrin Hanfu I'm collaborating with her in the office at the moment in the last 5, 6, 7 years intensely. We do like to go out with the kids and take the car and get away from all of that and sort of re-energize ourselves. Whether it's in Norway, definitely off the beaten track, and then, I think this is the best thing in life you can do. Picking your own berries and then making your pancakes. I think you can't have it better. As an office nowadays, we try to do almost everything in wood. We try to convince every client to do that, and we also stumble because we're in the Alps now more and more due to the Villa Vals, etc. You stumble, for example, on this house that the painter Balthus bought and where he lived, the biggest chalet, which impresses us incredibly. On our hikes, we have a look at the amazing and beautiful houses we tend to stumble upon, or in the Italian Alps, where the Walser houses that migrated through the Alps in an amazing way look on. Or skiing and coming back to, we love old hotels. That's one of our big hobbies, to go to old hotels. I'm almost done. Is that okay? Okay. So these are, let's say, the fascinations that I have, that we also have as an office to work on and to make just a much more beautiful world, and freeing ourselves from the constraints of the money-driven way of architecture nowadays. I think I want to stay away from that. I really want to stay away from it. It sucks you up in a very negative way. And we use art a lot. We work together, for example, with Henri Jacobs on pieces in our work, or we talk about how to deal with ornamentation, etc. So I think artists are incredibly strong and incredibly interesting because they quite often tell a much better story than I think nowadays we do as architects. Natasha Kensmil, the previous one, or Charlotte Schleifert, the freedom they take. And especially Henri Jacobs, that I collect already for 20 years, is amazing how he takes that freedom, but also the very preciseness of dealing with mathematics, etc. Solio, this is an amazing view of the Alps from 1903 in color. It has changed dramatically. Well, let's not talk about climate change. The last movie, then I'm done. I think this is, well, it says it, the artistic crime of the century. 40 seconds. it is all about joy and freedom that I think we should use in our profession way, way, way more.
Et il a commencé à me présenter son fil, un fil installé au fond
I
du
like the
jardin.
grass field, which is wild still.
And then with
You
one
almost don't see it
eye,
anymore.
I was able to see a little bit of the ambience light going onto the figure of my watch. If it was possible.
It took him 6 years
He wanted
to
get
prepare
higher than
this.
where he was going to be when he walked on the wire.
And there he was, between the Twin Towers. He was arrested, and then he had to jiggle in between kids, and then the police would say, "No, you just go home." Yeah, it almost makes you cry, beauty of this one. And I think this is, as you see how the world is turning out now, we should live on the edge of life. We should exercise rebellion in the best possible way, of course. These are two photos. One is of Philippe Petit, and the other one is the well-known terrorist attack. And we're talking, of course, on the rebellion on the first, on the right. That's rebellion. That's beautiful. It's amazing. It frees the world in many ways. The other one is the ugliest possible. So this was not about architecture, but it was to me about curiosity, imagination, precision, and freedom. I like to be precise, but I like to have freedom and joy. Our buildings is about purpose and meaning. Nature to me is one of the most important inspirations. But art helps me in my profession a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. It was way longer than the 20 minutes.
Sorry.
Over
Probably
30 minutes.
when I rehearsed it, I spoke faster. Oh.
No problem. But I have, of course, more than one question for you, but I will keep it to one. And you talked about rebellion, about contrast, and had one question here that was, what is the most uncomfortable truth about the architectural profession that you wish more people were willing to confront?
Do you have an evening?
In a minute?
No, I think our profession has become so complex that you have to dig through piles of documents before you enter to the, let's say, to what it is about. So, unfortunately, what I see is most of the time now when they ask us for a new commission, is that the commission is simply ridiculous. It's too late, it's too little, it's too... And in the end, it comes down to money. What I've seen happening is that most of the buildings you're commissioned is not about... That's why you have the housing crisis. It's not about making a roof over people. It's about making a roof over money. And that really pisses me off. I don't want to deal with that.
You said you want to be a way of money-driven architecture.
I do understand you need to earn money on that, but I would like to see clients that's their part, and they come to me with a clear commission, and they deal with that shit, I'll deal with the building. But if they put on you the fact that you need to make me more money than I'm already making on that building, then I'm not in. I'm not in. So there, I love my profession, and I said, but I'm almost driven to art or to maybe developing. I'm doing now 2 small projects, simply because I'm getting tired of the questions they ask me. Not anymore. I think it's not where we are at the moment, where we should be at the moment. So that's why we are luckily enough able to convince some clients to do a project in wood instead of concrete. We have amazing private clients that take the time and the effort to make a special thing. But I think at the moment we make a lot of buildings that make no sense, and we don't make the buildings that make sense, that we need. That's why you see I think there lies the problem.
Now it's maybe more than one question. Huh?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile working on projects that might contribute, that has that good side, that might contribute to gentrification and displacement? So you want to be on one side, but don't talk me about you want clients that appreciate that.
Yeah, I think most of the time as an architect, you're not in the position to steer that. I think that is a... so this idea that an architect can change the world, I think forget it. We can't. We just contribute in a very tiny part. But this almost rabid capitalism is now, sort of flooding the world. And you are a very small part of it. And I think most important is to try and to keep it close to yourself and be able to convince your client that it should be maybe done in another way, or it should be done in a more conscious way, or in an environmentally better way. Maybe I'm not that good to convince clients. Some people are very good, I think, to do that, very successful to do that. But if not, then you better stay small and you better sort of calm down.
If you have 700 employees, like Uwe and Big, 700 or even more, that's huge. But there is a whole topic that we could discuss later, the three of you.
No, but I think, Uwe or Bjarne, they are extremely good in convincing those clients. It's amazing. It's amazing to see that. And our practice is very different. It's more, it's smaller. It is. I have to be very careful in how to do it.
We have to be careful with time.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry.
No.
But we have time later.
It's my fault. It's my fault.
Sorry for that. But Bjarne, thank you for the beautiful talk. We really appreciate it.